Welcome to the Safety Doc Podcast with your charismatic host and prominent safety expert, Dr. David Perodin. Be entertained and informed as the Safety Doc discusses both best and bizarre practices in safety preparation and crisis response. The truth will keep you safe. Follow Dr. Perodin on Twitter at SafetyPhD.
Hi, everybody. This is David, and welcome to the Safety Doc Podcast. This is podcast number 30. And I am going to welcome our guest today, Hector Solis from Typical Daddy Podcast. Hector, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Quick shout out to Hector. Hector helped me substantially with improving the audio for my show. And I felt I was getting pretty good content and getting emails from people saying, I like the show, but can you improve your audio? And finally, just out of his kindness, Hector reached out to me and said, you know what, I think I have some pointers which would help to improve your audio. And certainly those proved very fruitful. So Hector, right off the bat, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for allowing me to help you. Some people are not very receptive to help, so I appreciate that.
So tell us about you. I mean, who you are, about your family, about your interests.
So I'm obviously a father. I'm a daddy of two girls, and they're 3 years apart. And I've been married since 2004, so 13 years. But I've known my wife since I was 8 years old. So we grew up together. Yes, we grew up together. We were neighbors. Of course, when I was a little kid, I was more into playing with her brother. Her brother was my best friend growing up.
Sure.
And so she told me she had always admired me from afar because girls are more mature at that age, right?
Right.
And then it wasn't until maturity kicked in and we graduated high school and her brother had come back from the military. And so we reconnected. He left to the Marines for 4 years. And then when he got back, we started hanging out and she was coming along. Of course, she was a woman by that point. Right. And so I'm like, wow, she caught my attention. We started talking and one thing led to another. And here we are today.
Wow. That is amazing. Yeah. I also have two daughters, ages 6 and 10. And tomorrow is my 16th wedding anniversary. So
wow, congratulations.
We were just talking about when we did our honeymoon in Las Vegas. It was prior to September 11th, 2001. And we toured Hoover Dam. And the security was pretty lax on the tour.
Sure.
Like, one guy way up in front. We were kind of toward the back and walking past all of these different levers and switches. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, boy, anybody could, kind of pull a few knobs here and all of a sudden Las Vegas goes dark or something like that. But,
right.
It just didn't seem like anything you had to worry about. But yeah,
things are different now.
I remember. Yeah. And on the top of the dam, we were kind of rushing across and they still could drive across. And I dropped my sunglasses and a semi locked up its brakes and came to a stop, like right in front of him, and then kind of waved to me like to go down and get him. I'm like, it's okay. You could have run him over,
Wow.
Stop your semi and destroy your load in the back. But so anyway, Hector, I was on the website earlier, the Typical Daddy Podcast, typicaldaddy.com.
Yes.
And I'll link that out with the show. So you collaborate with other dads to produce the show. Which is fascinating because, I mean, just the logistics, everything that goes into that. But tell me about how that show came to be.
Yeah. So just to finish answering the question that you originally asked me about my interests. And that kind of leads into the Typical Daddy website. So my background is in psychology. I have a degree in psychology, and I was actually studying to get my master's in psychology. And my emphasis was on leadership and the effects of the leader personality on the subordinate motivation. And so I was getting ready. I had finished all my coursework for my master's coursework, and I was getting ready to do a thesis so that I could graduate. And at the same time, I was working my way through my company, and I was rising up the chain of command pretty quickly. And so an opportunity came up, and they wanted to move me into management. My thesis kind of fell apart when the CEO of the company got fired.
Oh, my
And
goodness.
so my thesis was centered around the structure of our current, or of the organization at the time.
Okay.
And I lost all access to what I was going to do.
Wow.
Well, that coincided with me getting the promotion to supervisor, and then of course that took up all my time. So I never got to finish my master's degree. I have all the completed coursework, but not the actual degree in psychology.
Okay.
So at that point, I was transitioning. Our company was moving away from paper and moving into digital. So I started training myself on technology, learning about databases and systems and how systems talk to one another. So long story short, a few years passed, and now I'm in a management position for technology. And so that's fulfilling to me in a certain aspect, because I've always been interested in technology and coding and things like that.
Sure.
However, I have a creative side of me as well. And ever since I was younger, I've always wanted to help people. So that was the original purpose of going into psychology, was to try to help people.
Right.
And so the two things are coming together for in the Typical Daddy podcast. And so me and a buddy that I started working with there, he and I would have discussions. So we became friends in about 2003. And this was before we had kids. And we would talk a lot about kind of what we would be like as parents and things like that. And so the point came where, I had my first daughter, and then he had his daughter. And then we started talking about like strategies about how to raise our kids.
Sure.
And so we said, okay, well, we're smart guys. We can go and research this and figure this out, right? Being a first-time father is very scary. And so started doing research, and we started hitting upon mom blog after mom blog after mom blog after mom blog. I mean, it is saturated with moms putting their stories out there. But the biggest thing that we found in that was they weren't really providing information like, here's bullet points like males typically do, like just give me the short version.
Right.
Right. So they give us, today I woke up and I made breakfast and I did this, and like 4 paragraphs down, they say, okay, my child had a fever. This is how I handled it. Right.
Yes.
So you kind of had to weed through how to do those things. So we said, okay, well, why don't we start writing something and see if we can put something together that would be helpful for fathers, something that's very concise, something that gets to the point. And we wanted to keep it with 100 or 500 words or less. Of course, that causes a problem. How do you adequately explain yourself in 500 words or less? The idea was dads are busy. We have a lot to do, especially being a first-time father. You're kind of fumbling your way through learning all the things that you need to do to take care of your kid. So we wanted to keep it short so that people could read it and then move on. However, like I said, you're not getting all the information across. At the same time, I started listening to podcasts, and there were podcasts on people doing reviews of the shows that I liked. So the shows that I was watching, I wanted to get more information on them. So I would hear people talk about them, and they had a different perspective watching it than I did. So at that point, I started talking to Henry. He's the father on the Typical Daddy podcast. He and I were the ones that initiated this. And we said, hey, why don't we enhance the blog with a podcast? Because the podcast is a very unique medium in that people can take it with them and listen, and they can multitask while they're doing it. So with reading, you have to sit down, read, right? So you have to make some time to read and then process the information, things like that. With a podcast, you can listen to it over and over and over. You could take it to work. You could take it on your drive. You can do it when you're working out or exercising. So we thought this is a great way to enhance our blog by doing a podcast. And so we built the site. The site was up May of last year, 2016. Okay. And then shortly after that, about a month later, we released our first episode. First episode. And it was, I wrote an article called I Don't Help with the Kids. And we enhanced that with the podcast episode that says I don't help with the kids.
Sure.
So that's kind of how it started, is to get information. The podcast now has become the main focus because it's much easier to relate emotion and ideas and flush them out, especially bouncing them off dad to dad. The listener, the people that are absorbing the content, can get more out of it than reading a blog. So also, we're not by any means literary experts, so we don't have the editing skills to write something down and to make it sound elaborate and very concise and do all those things. So we said, well, we can talk and we can edit it and make it sound any way we need to. So that's kind of how it started.
So Hector, how many fathers total work with you on the podcast?
So initially we started with 4, including myself. So it was me. So my background is psychology. Then we have Henry. We were the originators of it, and he has an MBA in business.
Okay.
And then we have Naresh. He's from India originally. He just recently, this past week, became a U.S. citizen. He's got a master's degree in computer science. And then, so we were the 3 dads. And then Ed, we bring Ed in. He's not a father, but we kind of have Ed help us with having the lens to the outside world, because everything that we do nowadays is look at everything through the lens of being a father.
Yes.
And so a lot of the ideas that we come up with and the discussions that we have, we talk about it through that perspective. And then Ed jumps in and kind of pulls us back and gives us a little more outsider's perspective. And so that we can kind of enhance our thinking a little bit, because as you know, becoming a father, you kind of get wrapped up in that world and everything becomes about being a great father and trying to be a great husband and things like that. Right. And then now this past season, we just added Sergio, and Sergio, he's from San Antonio, but he's now living in New York. And our latest episode that just dropped on Monday was a story of him having his twins. And so we released an episode of taking him through the time that his wife's water broke and all the way up until the time that the delivery happened. And his kids were born 8 weeks early. So there was some drama related to that. So it's a short story. It's our first attempt at a story in our podcast. Everything else has been more discussion. So I encourage you to check it out. It's an interesting.
I will.
I found out that as I was narrating his story, I found myself back into that moment where I was going to have my first baby, and all the anxiety and nervousness and worry for the safety of my wife and for the safety of my child and for, oh crap, I'm not ready for this.
Yeah. I remember being at the hospital, and when my wife went into labor, and frantically on the cell phone trying to dial my parents and my wife's mother and other people, that we wanted there, and was able to get through to some and not through to others, and say, you got to get here, and they don't live close by. And I remember my oldest, my first child, when they handed me her. And I never really thought of a boy or a girl, but having a girl, there's a lot of things like I've done. I've never thought I would ever do, like be the dance dad. My girls are into dance, so going and sitting in dance lessons and watching them and watching them practice dance in our living room, and then they're putting on their little performances. But I remember when my daughter was handed to me, I just broke down in tears. And I didn't expect that. I was just so overwhelmed. And my dad said, "Is everything okay?" And I said, "Yeah, it's a beautiful, young, it's my daughter. I can't believe it." And it was just an incredible moment, and it's
surreal.
They've been, of course, ups and downs with dads.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember one time I came home and my wife said, "Okay, tell Dad what you did today." And my daughter, who was probably like 4 at the time, said, "I peed in my bottom drawer." I said, "Why?"
That's impressive.
And I said, no, we don't do that. And one of my other daughters carved when she was about 5, carved a heart on her dresser.
Oh,
And I came in and I had to say, we don't carve on our dressers. And afterwards I thought, boy, that is the cutest thing. And I took a picture of it and thought, years from now, hopefully this piece of furniture, will maybe travel with her and her family, and there'll be that little memory with it.
Yes, it's very hard to see those cute things and know that I need to teach them at this moment. This is not the correct thing to do, but geez, this is so cute and adorable. And, you want to say, oh, wow, that's amazing, but you have to keep the straight face and you have to be the father, right?
Right. So this is hard. Not how we treat our furniture. So, I don't want to see this again. And then as soon as she's out of the room, I'm taking a picture of it and sending it to my parents. I'm like, oh my goodness. So Hector, help me to, I guess, understand the purpose of Typical Daddy podcast. And before we get into that a little bit, once I had, we had our daughter and then daughters, I found myself kind of in conjunction with work, but I really disconnected from my dad friends. I mean, we lived in different areas, life became busy, and it wasn't really until listening to some of your episodes that I was doing more reflecting of saying, I just do not have, and I think it's very common. I think it's very common. I just don't have that network of dads anymore, just to even talk of what we're talking about right now, which to me, your podcast is introducing this conduit to connect dads, and just even for a dad to listen and to relate to something that you say and remember that moment, just as you're saying, with one of the dads from the moment of going to the hospital until the birth. So when you thought about developing this podcast and what it is today, are those the same things, or did it take this totally different route and bring you to a different spot?
The initial one, the very first episode we did, which is it was the enhancement to the I don't help with the kids. And by the way, if any ladies are listening, the idea by I don't help with the kids is I don't want to be known as a father, or we don't want to be known as fathers where we're helping the mother. We want to be participants in our kids' lives. So it's not I'm helping, but I'm participating in our kids' lives. And so when we did the podcast, it was going to be, like I mentioned, the enhancing of the blogs and to give people a little bit more background and to hear our voices and to connect with that. Because a lot of times you're reading and you have your own voice in your head and your own thoughts, and you bring your own experiences when you're interpreting that. But really, we wanted to have the guys go out there and listen to us talk about it and have those discussions. So Henry, the co-creator of this, he did all the editing and producing of season 1. So if you look at the episodes in season 1, they're very lighthearted. He's a very lighthearted kind of guy. Okay. So he always looks at the fun things in life. He's got the lens of trying to make good things out of bad situations. And so we talk about discussions about, paranormal things that have happened to us when we were kids, all the way to discussing some current events about what was happening in the Olympics. And so those things are very lighthearted. They're not very focused on helping dads do anything other than come here for a few moments, hang out with the guys, listen to us talk about what we're experiencing and what we've done in the past. And hopefully it'll help remind you of some of the things that have happened in your past, right? And so that was very much the feel of season 1. Season 2, as we were making our preparations for season 2, I told Henry, can I give it a shot at season 2? Let me produce it. Let me edit it. And I had to learn it all right at that point. And so I said, okay, so I want it to be, coming from the psychology background, season 2 is for people, out of every episode, what what message do we want to send? What can people take out, or what can dads and even moms, what can they take out of this? So I created a structure with segments, and each segment had a purpose. And I tried to, if you listen to the episodes, I'm the one kind of moderating the discussion.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to guide them and keep them in. And every now and then I'll throw in something a little more deep thinking and meaningful so I can elicit that from the guys. And so the topics that we're talking about in season 2, we're talking about some of the issues that are arising with sex, teachers having sex with the students. So more and more we're hearing about those things happening. And so we were focusing more from the guy point of view. So there were some lighthearted moments in there, but some serious moments in there.
Right.
And then we also talked all the way to, we talked about having discussions about suicide and what that means for our kids growing up and living in this world. So the range of discussions are a lot more serious. We have episodes on social media and how the kids are being impacted by that today. We had 2 authors that we interviewed. So we talked to Nancy Jo Sales, and her book was American Girls.
I appreciate that episode. I listened start to finish. It was excellent.
Yes, that was actually not planned at all. It came out of episode 2. So on episode 2, it was initially supposed to be 4 segments. The first 2 segments were, hey, let's do some research on social media. You know, it's kind of exploding now, and how are the kids using it? Let's find out how are kids using it. Give some parents some information on that, because as fathers, we weren't very engaged in Twitter and Facebook because we don't have time for that, right? We're busy getting everything done and going through the day-to-day tasks,
right?
So at least for us. And so we said, well, let's do some research. Let's see how kids are using it. So first segment in season 2, episode 2, it was, what is our initial reaction? What do we think social media is and how kids are using it? The second segment was going to be, okay, what did we find in our research? How are they using it? What's going on? Are they abusing it? Are they not? Then the third segment was going to be about cyberbullying and how social media is being used to cyberbully. And then the fourth segment was going to be how that cyberbullying kind of led to some suicides, and talk about our feelings about that.
Yes.
Well, when we started talking about that, it really grew into probably 3-4 episodes. And so we stopped during our research into social media, and we had a quick discussion, and we're like, okay, this is way worse than we thought it was as far as how out of touch parents our age today, and how we are in social media, and how kids are using it, and how fast it's changing, and how that really impacts cyberbullying. It's a major, major problem. And then also the suicide. Now, it seems like almost every month you hear some teenager committing suicide because of some sort of bullying incident or cyberbullying incident. And with kids that are now getting into the middle school age and eventually into the high school age, I felt as a father, and I'm sure the other guys did too, I'm not ready for this. I'm not prepared. I don't know what that world looks like. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when I grew up, though I understood that world. This world is completely out of my strike zone.
Yes.
And so we said, okay, one, on social media and the dangers, and our parents prepared, and why we know for sure that you're not really prepared for it. And so we tried to do research around that. We spent many hours, each of us, doing that. And then during that research, Henry found the book from Nancy Jo Sales. And he said, hey, let me reach out to her. Let's see if she'll come on. Thankfully, she did. And we had the discussion about that. And then that was episode 3. And then episode 4 was about cyberbullying. And we said, this is a real hard topic to talk about. It makes us feel bad. I mean, I felt really depressed. Not clinically depressed, but depressed as in didn't have the energy, didn't have the motivation to keep working on the episode as I was doing the episode, because it's a tough subject to think about, especially when you're coming from a father's perspective and thinking, my daughter is getting ready to go into the ages where this is a real crisis. And how am I going to be available to her and prepare her for that world when I have never experienced that world.
Right.
And so for a while there, I got pretty sad. And so, in that moment of sadness, Henry, the lighthearted guy, he said, "Hey, there's this great book on poop." And I'm like, "Poop? What do you mean? Guys like to talk about poop. We just do, right?
Yeah,
It's just,
we can change
farting
the
and pooping
right now. So yeah, okay.
That's right. So we said, "Hey, let's interview this author and let's talk about potty training." And so we asked if she would come on. She graciously said yes, and we had a blast. It was one of the most fun things that we've ever done. And so that's why we did it as episode 5, right after the cyberbullying, to kind of alleviate some of that heaviness that we were experiencing in the 3 episodes. And so now we've kind of leveled off, and we're going to be closing the first part of our second season here with 3 episodes on the 13 reasons why, and we're going to be discussing that from the lens of the father.
Yeah.
So that's the long way around it, but yeah, that's that. And so we don't really know what our podcast is yet, because we have some of Henry's flavor in season 1, and then you've got mine, which is the other extreme, which is very serious issues, things that I think should be discussed, because I'm coming more from the psychology perspective. And so I think as we go through these seasons, we're adjusting that. So you'll find some lighthearted episodes, and you'll find some more serious episodes coming from our perspectives.
And you indicated to me that in addition to dads, you've been contacted by mothers who have said, "I appreciate your show because it's providing me a perspective and an insight into my husband and what it's like to be a dad that I didn't have." So tell me about that.
Yeah, so we've had a few people reach out to us, and some of the people that are around us that are becoming aware that we're doing a podcast, and so one of the things that surprised us, I think, is we get more interaction from females saying that I listen to you guys because I want to see how my husband is thinking, and get a perspective on the male brain, so to speak, and how we address these topics. And so a lot of times I'm having a discussion about cyberbullying or suicide with my wife, and listening to her perspective is almost, it's coming from a different lens, obviously, and it's coming from her experiences as a female addressing those issues. So I noticed that our perspective is slightly different, and also I don't know if it's more analytical, I guess. As guys, we have a hard time expressing ourselves. So it's helpful for the females to see that, we're struggling through some of these things, some of these topics that we're talking about, and that they are important issues to us, even though we don't always express it.
So how do you take that information and, I guess, put it into practice? Where is it then a discussion you're having with your child? I guess, what comes out of that? So you're having the discussion, which is validating for the fathers and mothers listening to this, that, oh, there are other people who share the same feelings I do. Is this my child is entering this sea of social media, which is, the waves are choppy and all over, and I have no idea what's happening on top of the surface and under the surface.
Yeah.
But I guess, what were some of the practical things you felt, this is how I'm going to approach this with my child? Or maybe some of the other dads said, I'm going to have just talk with my child about social media and what it means to them. And I don't know. I mean, and I don't know this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have the same reactions, right? It's like, okay, I have all this information now. How do I use it? How do I use it to help me become a better father? And if you listen to some of the podcasts on the I call them the social media series, which is episodes 2, 3, and 4, and that's the social media, the Nancy Jo Sells, and the cyberbullying. So for me, from my perspective, what I got out of that is I need to be more engaged with my daughters in the moment, not necessarily spend more time with them, but make the time that I do spend with them valuable, make it count.
Right.
And so one of the strategies that I came up with, and I mentioned it in the podcast, was it's quality over quantity of the time. And even if I'm spending 5 minutes with my daughter, I need to be cognizant of being in the moment with her, observing her behaviors, her nonverbal cues as well as her verbal cues, so that I can get an understanding, a very deep understanding of her personality and her behaviors. Because when the time comes in middle school or high school and they start to have those issues that are affecting them sociologically, I can see the micro behaviors and pick up that something's wrong, right? And so the other thing, the strategy that I wanted to do was, well, we have 2 kids, and of course it's me and my wife. And so a lot of times we go out as a family. And when you're out as a family, you're all over the place. Sometimes you're talking to one daughter and you're jumping to the other, then you're jumping to the wife and vice versa, right? It's very chaotic if you just kind of break down the social interaction that happens with a family. It's very what do you call it? ADD, right? Your little talk here and somebody's asking over here and you're jumping over there and you're talking, right? So it's even though you're spending time with them, it's not for the specific daughter that needs that quality time. It's not quality of time. So what I talked to my wife about was every other weekend or once a month, we're going to alternate taking our daughters. She would take one daughter, I would take another daughter. And I'm going to spend 6 to 8 hours just with the one daughter to focus in, to understand, leave the phone behind. Of course, obviously you need it for communication, but don't check email, don't check work, don't do any of that stuff. Sit down and ask tough questions of my daughter so that she gets used to me asking those questions. And if I make it a regularly scheduled thing, when the time comes in their high school years or their middle school years, and I say, hey, it's time for us to go do our daddy day, right?
Right.
They're not going to see that as something out of the ordinary. They're going to be used to it. And hopefully over the time, I've established that trust and relationship with them so that it's a comfortable experience for them versus me not being engaged in that way. And then all of a sudden I notice something's wrong with her. And then I say, hey, why don't we go have a meal together? She's going to think, well, that's weird. Why now do you want to go talk to me? Because I'm in trouble? Sure. And she's not going to open up, right? So it's kind of lowering the defenses over time instead of trying to get in and try to figure out when she's in trouble. So I want to be there in the good times and in the bad times. And hopefully my hope is that over time, I've established a relationship with my daughter. And, you set up some rules and say that anything you discuss here, you will not be penalized for. Of course, if it's something illegal, then obviously you have to. But, you set up that trust and say, look, this is between us. We talk about things. And I talk about very deep things with her, like, are you being bullied at school? Things like that. Not just the fun things, but talk about the serious things. Because I don't want those things to be a surprise when she gets older and I start asking probing questions. It's going to feel uncomfortable to her because she's not used to it.
My oldest daughter had indicated there was a student at school who was exhibiting some bullying type behavior, not necessarily directed at her, but she was seated proximal to the student and was feeling apprehensive about that. Shared that with my wife and with I and we talked to her about it and said, what you're telling us, if either of us was in this position, we would feel the same way as you. Mm-hmm. And actually, that's something I've learned as a critical incident debriefer for the county sheriff's department in the training I've gone through. Mm-hmm. But it resonated with her, and I said, we're going to contact the teacher and the principal and just to make them aware of this. And we don't want you to feel uneasy about it. And like, I can be there if you want. But we are going to make this contact and express this because we want you to not feel, unsafe at school. So we did make the contact and it was over the weekend. The teacher did respond and say, said would address it. And we did also meet with or had email communication with the principal and felt, that the matter had been resolved. But yes, there's a little bit of a strange positionality because my daughter's like, well, you have a PhD and you're the safety doc and you testify in legal cases and things. And I said, I'm not trying to use that as any type of leverage or anything, but what you're saying I want your teachers to be aware of, and I want this situation changed because you love school, and this is bringing, tension to you,
Yes.
and we can sense that, and we want to make it better for you. And she did. She handled it well. It wasn't anything like, no, please don't, please
Right.
don't go to school. And, it was a good experience. And I'm glad that my wife and I worked together,
Yes.
having that discussion, and then, making that contact, and then leaving it really, not accusatory of the school at all, of just saying, we want you to be aware of this is what, our daughter is saying. And, this is a situation we'd like, you to look into and to resolve it and get back to us.
I think it's very important for us as parents. You approached it that way, a very logical, sound way of doing it. Some parents are very reactionary, and they'll go and it actually embarrasses the kid, right? Based on how the parent's reacting, and they get real aggressive with the school, and, they want information. And then now the kid becomes a target because, well, now you're a tattletale, and that gives them a reason to not trust you the next time that something's going to happen to handle it appropriately. And so I think coming up with a solution with your daughter is the perfect way, because it's a joint solution, right? Not just coming from a dad or a mom and their perspective, but they're being part of the solution and not just contributing to the problem.
Yeah, for some reason, we had the collective, I guess, knowledge to I think approach that in a way that was made the school feel comfortable, and but it was one of those things where also, we were very clear. I mean, between my wife and I, that if we didn't have a resolution, that we would bring it to the next level of
Yes.
asking to meet with the superintendent. And in my experiences with schools, once you bring an awareness, to the teacher or administrator, that they definitely want to make school a safe learning environment for all students. But I do a lot, Hector, with input systems, and I work as a senior consultant with Sprigio, which is a company that has bowling reporting. But I've also done some things with ISS 24/7, and they work with about half of the NFL arenas. And so if someone is having experience at a game where, someone is out of control, drunk next to them and whatever, they can text the number. And so we've worked on user interfaces of how to make people feel comfortable and how to remove those barriers and actually get them as visual and simple as can be. So in encouraging, teaching how to use those. I'm going to share an experience. You earlier said you hadn't been the victim of bullying, and I was the victim of bullying, of cyberbullying. When I was a school administrator, I had a situation with a student that did not make a cut for a show choir.
Okay.
And along with, so like 30 students would make it, and that was kind of it.
Yeah.
And this student wasn't amongst the 30 that made it. And the parents rallied a lawyer and advocates and this kind of large group to contest this. And we did have 4 judges that were trained, and we did have alternatives that students could participate in where there was not a cut. But all of a sudden on social media, the parents started to go after me. I was this evil person, and I had, and granted, some of that's going to happen.
Sure.
But I was looking through the post, and I was reading a paragraph that was written of this person needs to be removed from their position and all of that. And I got to the end, and it was one of my best friends that wrote it.
Oh, wow. Oh,
and
yeah.
I got a hold of him, and I said, "Did you make a post about?" He's like, "Yeah, there's something going on with." I'm like, "That's me."
Wow.
You didn't even know that. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll go in and erase it. And And
Wow.
it was one of those things where it too is this tendency for the snowball effect,
piling on. Yep.
Even with adults to get on board without being fully informed. And I'll never forget that reading this, and I'm like, oh my goodness. So yeah, it's Carl. Got a hold of Carl, and that was
He didn't even realize, huh?
No, he didn't. I mean,
Crazy.
he was reading the other post that had been made, which was painting out this person who was closed-minded and all of that. And what nobody saw that I never posted was I actually went to the parents' place of employment and met with them. Offered to and sat down and kind of explained things and met at their house and showed them the other things and said, I tried to be as reasonable as I could in this situation, but
Sure.
But it was a very awkward feeling to be in, especially when one of your friends, jumps in and we hear about these things where something can go viral.
Mm-hmm.
And especially for kids. I mean, if kids make, and when I say kids, youth, middle school.
Yes.
They make a post or somebody makes a post about them, and it starts to go viral. It is that it can be that very visceral reaction of, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't even know how I'm going to face my classmates. Where you and I, we could handle that.
Yes.
Probably we'd rationalize through that.
Yep.
But when you're a seventh grader, it can literally push you to the point, because you don't have the developed frontal lobe thinking of being, like, my options might include suicide.
Yes.
And you indicated that. I serve as an expert witness across the country, and the cases I largely work with are youth suicide, specific to systems where there's been a disconnect in reporting and follow up. And I'm involved in a case right now, and that's all I'll say. But I was contacted to be retained on another case in another state, and which I turned down. And it's also an awareness of, you mentioned it and you articulated it really well, Hector, of talking with your daughter and being able to have those discussions, because what happens is these things like surveys and stuff like that to try to find out what's happening with kids, they don't work. If you have a focus group, kids will tell you. And I remember working with a middle school about 2 years ago, a rural middle school, and they were wanting to kind of get to the heart of what they call the Facebook fallacy, or kids just coming in and breaking down because something was negatively posted about them on Facebook, or that they perceived was negative or whatever. And it wasn't until then even that the teachers were aware of what Tinder was. It was they told me it was the first time they learned about Tinder. And so some kid pulled out the phone and said, well, this is the Tinder app. And all of a sudden it's like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, this actually exists. And there's there's kids on here. And so it was one of those things. But at the same time, the kids felt comfortable enough, because it was one of those things of, okay, we're having this forum, be open, tell us what's going on. And they did. And then the staff came back, and the kids felt that they had a voice, that they had been heard. They worked on, things like safe kind of breaks, vacations from social media, what's appropriate, and things like that. I'm going to move us along a little bit. You had mentioned, Hector, the importance of scheduling family time, and like that, that Thursday nights, that's your podcasting time. Tell me about how you go about doing that, and not only like setting it up, but how do you maintain it?
Yes. So the idea then is there's a few principles that you need to kind of put your mindset into, so that way when you deviate from what you're trying to do, you become aware of that. So one of them is discipline. I mean, it's hard to do, but you have to be disciplined. So for me, the things in order are family first, then work, because I need to support my family, and then anything else that I'm going to be doing outside of that. That has to be on my own time, not taken away from the family time. So for me, Thursdays, I have to coordinate, or we have to coordinate multiple dads. So we have multiple schedules that we're trying to coordinate. So we just found that Thursday nights at that time, or at 8:00, is the time where most of us can get to that at a reasonable time, and we can have the time to focus on doing the podcasting. And so for me, my schedule in episode 7, the Busy Dads, I wasn't on that episode because I had to do some editing and there were some scheduling conflicts. But my perspective on that was, I have to sacrifice something. There's always a sacrifice you have to do when you're going to do something on top of what your regular work day is and your family time. Right. So for me, the decision was pretty easy. It's sleep. So I get about 4 to 5 hours of sleep a night, 40 hours of work during the day, and then the rest of that time is family time. And then I have probably from about 8 to about midnight, 1:00 is my time to do research and to do podcasting, to spend a little more time with my wife. And so my schedule is, I get up at 6, get the kids ready, go to school, come back from 5 to 7:30, 8:00 is just their time. Let's get them ready. Let's get them started. Let's kind of download for the day. I do something with my daughters where, I tuck them in, but I spend a few minutes with them just in quiet, in silence, just being there and listening to them. And, there's so much connection that can happen just by holding their hand when they're asleep. It's those quality moments that I'm trying to extract at the end of the day. And so it also gives them a sense of security, that I'm there, that I'm engaged with them, that, at that moment, nothing's more important than me being there with you. So I wanted to convey that message. So that's what I do. And so they typically go to bed between 7:30 and 8:00. And once they're down and they're ready to go to sleep, that's when my time starts. The next job, which is the podcasting, starts. So we record on Thursdays, but throughout the week, anytime that I don't have scheduled with my wife, as far as spending time with her and doing the things that we need to do, even if it's just, hey, we're going to watch our favorite TV show together. We sit down for a few hours, and sometimes I get a little anxious because it's 10:30, and then she's ready to go to bed, and now I've got to prepare for the podcast and do the work and things like that. So as you know, it's a lot of work. I don't know if people realize when they're listening to a podcast, that there's a lot of prep work that goes into it. There's, during the recording, you have to record it, and then you have to edit it and prepare it for release. And so that's a lot of time as well.
Yeah, I started podcasting in October. So this is episode 30, and I've managed every week to do one hour episode. And some of them, and I also teach 6 college classes a year in addition to my job, and I've done that for like 15 years in graduate courses and like pupil services, non-discrimination, and plus some other things. And that's just always been me. I've always done things like that. And we actually had, last night I run every night, and I started to run, I weighed about 50, 60 pounds heavier. I did a presentation on PBS TV after Sandy Hook. I approached PBS and I said, I think I can do a presentation about school safety that would be unlike anything you've had, completely empirically based, no rhetoric. Did a proposal. They liked it. And it was like 37 pages of citations for my presentation I had with me. And the NRA had lobbyists in the audience. It's this live show because they don't know where you're going to go with this. And you're reaching, I'm broadcast 8 times across the country and Canada, and I got a kick out of it. I mean, because, but I wanted it to be, very, very much accurate to what the statistics were. Like, one of the things I shared was, there were numerous listening sessions about school safety, and over 77,000 people across all of the states had input to these sessions. Nobody knew about it. So I brought that up in some other things and, you know, stuff that was less known.
Sure.
And, you know, I remember watching that show. And it was amazing to go through that process, you know, to be on TV of, you know, here's where you stand and don't look back at the camera and we'll feed you thing through the headphones and whatever, or your bud. But, and it was live and you can show it live, but then they have to idle it and then they have to close caption it and put it before review board. And then they rated it G and then it got out to the whole country. But I remember I was done with it, and an elderly lady in the front row came up and gave me this big hug. And she just said, you know, my grandkids go to school, and I was just so worried, and you just did such a nice job of sharing information. And basically, you know, I said, you know, here's, you know, what school safety looks like. It's interesting because in 4 years, so it was May 22nd, 2013, over 4 years ago, a lot has changed. I would give a different presentation since then, and not necessarily like that things are worse. It's just, it's different than it was than when I gave it 4 years ago. And I worked with one of the mothers who lost a daughter at Sandy Hook also. And, you know, but when I watched this video, I'm like, oh my goodness, like I didn't look well. And part of it was like, I needed to lose weight. So I lost weight. I was working full time on my dissertation, but you talk about being a dad. I took my daughter who was second grade at the time and I walked her to school and from school. So I held her hand. She'd give me your backpack, your dad take the backpack and, you know, whatever it was, the Dory or whatever, you know,
Dora
the Explorer, I guess. And I'd walk her and I got to know the other parents who would wait and they'd pick their kids up. And pretty soon we just started talking. And that was some of the most incredible discussion, you know, of things. And then my daughter coming out in that big smile and I could quickly get, you know, we only lived a few blocks from school, but what happened today? Tell me about today. Well, my friend did this and we did this. And when we get home, you know, and we'd open up the backpack and pull out and I scanned in her artwork and I would send it to grandma and grandpa. And of course we put it up on the fridge. And actually I just did that over the weekend. I took both of they're very good with art. And I took, I said, what are some things that you want me to scan to like the relatives and stuff like that. And they gave me some different things and I scanned it out and I said, this stuff's awesome. And, you know, I'm going to send it out. And, so yeah, we really had a blast. We had a blast with that. So in our final minutes, Hector, so yeah, in my podcasting and I am so thankful to you because, you know, like I have the photos to prove like the completely obscure way that I was doing interviews. Yeah. I had a tower of notepads, like 25 notepads with an external speaker hooked up. And I would do a phone interview with retired LAPD detective and try to put this together. And I didn't, I mean, I was doing my best, but, I really didn't, know where to go. I mean, and you helped me tremendously. And actually, the whole podcast community, and this is what I want to kind of close with. Sure. I would contact people who might, you know, that they had shows where they had 300-400 episodes. And I would say, I'm new into this. Like, what do you suggest for a microphone? Boom. You know, like within the day, I suggest, hey, it's great that you're getting into this. Here's what I suggest. Any questions? Let me know. Here's something else. By the way, like here's kind of a format I use. Here's some people. If you want, I can give you their name and they're open to some interviews. And I was like, wow. And I have experienced, it's just this family type atmosphere amongst podcasters. And I'm so impressed by that. And also I've started to share with people. I said, it's almost like this is starting to balance out the social media, the Facebook, the Instagram, the other stuff that's out there. And I'm not sure kids are so much into podcasting, although I I've never really looked at if kids are creating Actually, I have seen a couple kids who have done podcasts about like what it's like to have a disability, and they do have a pretty good following. They put it together pretty well. But but I think we're at this period in time where this kind of awesomeness is happening with the community. This is a great thing because you're planning. This is material I want to listen to. I do not listen to the mainstream media. I have no interest in turning on the TV and listening to 30 commercials of things I'm not going to buy. Right. I don't listen on the way to work. I only listen to podcasts. On the weekend, I download the typical Daddy. There's a number of others, about 10, 12 hours of podcast, and I listen to those every week. And I tell people, I feel like it's a postdoctorate degree. I feel like I'm learning. I feel like I'm connecting, and I can reach out and I can message these people and they get back to me. And even the people who are contacting me of saying, what you had in this episode really resonated with me, and thank you. And, would you maybe include something like this? Or someone asked me for something I mentioned that was a resource. And I'm like, yeah, get me an email address. I'll be glad to, it was a document, be glad to send it. And I sent it out. And, so is that your feeling? And also, is this a feeling because this is new and is this going to change, or what do you think?
Yeah, so I too get the same feeling. When we first launched our podcast last year, we weren't into social media. We weren't doing that much. We weren't promoting the show much. So we had maybe a couple hundred downloads across the 8 episodes that we did in season 1. And so in March of this year, I decided, well, you know what? We had a Typical Daddy Twitter account. I said, I'm going to create a Typical Daddy Pod Twitter account that just focuses on podcasting and releasing the episodes there and trying to connect with the podcasting community. Within a month and a half, maybe 8 weeks or so, the following went from 0 to like 800, 600 people. And a lot of them were the podcasters. They see that you're a podcast, so they follow you and they come on and they retweet your content. They like your content, and so their followers get exposure to your information, and then that starts to snowball, right? And so that's kind of how I happened upon you, and I'm sure that's kind of how you happened upon me. So it happened organically, right? You're not trying to pay for advertising or anything like that. It's just the community knows how difficult it is to do some of these podcasts, and the opportunity that we have to provide content that is completely under our control. It's not filtered by anybody. It's not restricted by anybody. There's no format. There's some podcasts that are 1 minute long episodes, and there are some podcasts that are, hours and marathon sessions of podcasting. And so the format is a bunch of variety. And so, you kind of mentioned to me about, is this oversaturating the market with podcasts? And, I would say a bunch of podcasts that are out there are terrible, but you know what? They're giving it a shot, right? Right. They're doing something. They're trying something new. They're trying to express themselves. So yes, I'll give you a shout out. If you're a podcast, I know I'm in that position. I'm going to help you out. Right?
Hello, everyone. This is David. Thank you for listening to my interview with Hector Solis of Typical Daddy Podcast. I also want to thank John Grant and the 405 Media for airing this show alongside the League of Extraordinary Podcasters. For those of you that enjoy the Safety Doc Show during its scheduled programming on the 405 Media, our time together will be ending in the next minute as we reach the limit of the 1 hour time slot allocated for the show. However, don't worry. You can listen to the remainder of this 80-minute extended version episode by visiting the 405 Media's homepage at the405media.com. Then click on the Partners tab. From there, find the Safety Doc Podcast and play show number 30, Fathers, Family, and Friends, interview with Typical Daddy, Hector Solis. This 80-minute full-length episode is also available on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. Now, back to the final segment of my interview with Hector Solis.
It's kind of like, the brother that needs the help, and you're going to give it to them. And they'll learn. they need to find their voice, just like we're still trying to find our voice. I'm sure since you started in October, you're trying to also get the feel for, what the listeners want and how to deliver that content in a way that makes it enjoyable for them and in a way that they can ingest that content appropriately, right? And
Right.
so doing that, I think it's right now the podcasting is in its infancy. And the reason for that, and we've had this discussion before, is there's not a lot of tools for us to measure our stats and our audience, and it's all fragmented. You have places like the Podmosphere, you have like SoundCloud, you have Podbean. There's a lot of people that are trying to help the podcasting community, so they're giving it a shot. And so you're going to see some, probably in the next few years, some of those are going to start falling off the map, and the ones that are the best content providers for the podcasters are the ones that are going to survive. And so I think you had also mentioned that the 25 episode mark is the make it or break it. I think you've mentioned that once you hit 25 episodes, you're kind of hitting your stride, and you're going to be able to do this for a while. And so, and I think that's correct. And part of the reason for that is after you have your initial content and you try to deliver the message, and as you're listening to your podcast, like I listen to mine after I edit many times to make sure that
I do too.
It's right? Because I care about the information that I'm providing to the people. And I think for me, it's very, very important that anybody that listens to our podcast, their time is very valuable to them. It's very valuable to me when I listen to a podcast. So I don't want to fluff them. I don't want to give them content. I want to be very respectful of the time that they're spending with us. So I'm going to put in the time to make sure that our podcast has the highest quality possible. And so the family feel was, I had listened to one of your episodes. It was a previous episode where I saw a topic and it had a psychology spin to it. And you briefly mentioned that you had reached out and some other podcaster was going to help you after you reached X amount of X amount of episodes, right? And yeah, I mean, he probably gets a lot of requests, and that's understandable. But I'm like, wow, okay, here's a guy that's having the same experiences that we were, because the first 2 episodes of this season that I took over, I had a hard time trying to get the gain right and sounding like you're in a tin can, and all the different strategies and doing endless hours of research. And so I kind of put myself in that situation, and I said, you know what, I'm going to sit back for a few weeks. I'm going to listen to his podcast and see if he eventually got helped or not, which is yours, right? Excuse me. And so, I said, okay, well, this episode, I'm going to contact the safety doc and say, all right, I'm going to say here, if you need help, I'm here to help you. Contact me whenever you're ready. And so, so then this is the family feel, right? So I felt like I could do that. There's an approachability with people that are doing podcasts. If you go to a radio show medium, there seems to be a big gap in the connection with the host, right? Like you connect through them with your listening and your time, but you don't feel like you can contact them, that they're not as approachable. Now, social media is helping bridge that gap, but with podcasting, it's different. It just feels different. And I think for that reason, it's going to start to explode in the next few years once the technology community gets in line with helping podcasters get the stats that they need so that they can deliver the content to the appropriate audiences. I think you're going to see an explosion in podcasts. And I've actually started seeing with a couple that I follow, when I first looked at when I was listening to podcasts a year ago, a lot of the podcasts didn't have advertising in it. It was just people talking, getting their content. And now there are some podcasters that have left their full-time jobs because there's the Patreon. I don't know if you've heard of Patreon yet, but it's a place where people can go and donate money to help you support your podcast. Well, some of these podcasters are getting 300-400 people at a time giving $5 a month. And so if you do the math, I mean, that's more than your regular salary if you're making middle income. And so some people have left their jobs and now they're focused on delivering content 100%. So it's actually getting to the point where people can make a career out of this, and it's not just after hours doing the extra time like we're doing, right? So I think it's the family feel. I don't know if it's going to go away as it starts to explode, it really depends on the podcaster's mentality of, getting too big, letting it get to their heads kind of deal. But
Right.
I think for the most part, I think people that go into podcasting appreciate the feedback. So I know I get real excited when people engage about an episode, because it's encouraging to us, even if it's hey, heard your podcast, good job, or hey,
Right.
that episode sucked.
No,
I want
yeah.
I want something, right? So hey,
Right.
you're listening. Okay, if you say it sucked, then why and how can I make it better, right? Because I want to make the listen. I want to provide some value to the listeners.
I did an episode about the NSA and the Patriot Act, and I had a
yes.
guest on, and on the YouTube, because I also post on YouTube plus then on iTunes, and I'm fortunate enough to have a regular time slot on the 405 Media out of Los Angeles, which just happened by luck. And there was another podcaster who contacted me and was interested in the 405 Media and was offered then a pretty substantial fee to be on the show. So I'm like, I lucked out. I got in. I've been producing content. I do a blog for them and things like that. So in return, I don't get charged anything to have that exposure.
Right.
But yeah, it's been exciting for me. And actually, I was sharing with my wife, in the last week, I was contacted by 3 different podcasters invited to be on their show, and they're all larger than I am.
Nice.
I'm like 712 followers, which is twice what I had 2 months ago. But they're bigger, they're more established in hundreds of episodes, and they've contacted me and said, would you be on a show? And I said, yeah, I'd be honored. So I'm scheduling those out. And just to close, I have a really neat podcast coming up. Close to me lives, he is only one of 2 licensed commercial drone operators in our county. So he has this is all he does. Like, he has this expensive drone, and get this, like, one of his contracts is he goes to a gravel pit and he flies over it in the morning, and the drone then can identify how much gravel there is. And then at night, he flies over it again and he can identify how much gravel's been removed. So they don't weigh the trucks or anything. Like, this drone calculates this, and it has all this 3D stuff on it, and he inspects like the wind turbines and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And he was amazing. I just kind of threw this idea past him. I said, I'd like to talk about the rules, because if I went out and I bought a drone for kind of just commercial interest, I probably would fly it straight up in the power lines. That'd be it. Or else, if I got a better one, fly it off into the sun, just like the NASA experiment. We're going to touch the sun. See how that turns out. But, but he was so excited to be, and I'm like, okay, let me preface this. Like, I have a small following.
Right.
And I love, I want to do this, and he was so passionate. He wrote like 2 pages. He came up with questions. He's like, we can actually have the drone hover and film us, and then
That's
you can have your camera on a tripod, and also so it can be filming while we're doing this interview, so it can break away and show. And he's like this, and he's just going through. And now, but the thing is, he's just starting to use it for search and rescue. And we had a significant last night, a major industrial explosion, not too far from where I live. I mean, in the community over 37 fire departments responded. I was out running, and I was close to the hospital when I was running, and all of the ambulances left at once. And all of a sudden, all of the red lights came on the heliopad, and I was a firefighter. Plus, I work for the sheriff's department as a debriefer. That's in a volunteer role, and I knew what that meant. Something significant happened. Either we have an interstate close by, and then I had learned about fatalities, and this thing was just leveled. I mean, it was just this this explosion, and I don't know. Actually, I kind of lost my train of thought with that. But he comes in things like that then, because they cannot approach right now. They still have a perimeter. They can't bring in the equipment closer because there's still ethanol tanks and so forth. But he can bring his drone. They can contract with him, and he can do his flyovers and get his. He actually has like the thermal on it, so he can indicate where the patches might be.
Wow.
But he was so excited, and I'm excited, and he's coming up then with all these ideas. We can shoot this, and why don't you hide something, like 2-3 blocks away, and then I'll go and I'll look for it, just as if it was a missing 4-year-old with autism.
Wow.
And we can do that.
Awesome.
And so, I'm like, and these are things that actually happen. And so if I'm a parent watching that episode, if I'm listening to the episode or whatever, and, I have a child with a special need, or we have a relative, or I know somebody, or even like one of my kids' classmates, I'm like, wow, this technology exists. And there's people out there like Preston who will, at the drop of a hat, if he gets the call, will go out there and work all night if he has to. And I'm just like, you're a great guy for
it's amazing
for doing this. And because I have this podcast, it's brought me in connection with you, and you also live a few blocks away. So like, you're going to be, cool dad to hang out with too.
Yes.
Also.
Yes.
So just kind of stuff like that, Hector. I mean, it's been really, it's been cool. So someone once asked me, they asked 2 questions, and then, we can wrap up the show. And the first was, now that your show is going, like, what are you going to do? I mean, it's a one-man show.
Right.
And if you go on vacation, or like, do you have a sunset plan for it? And I said, well, not really. I mean, at some point, something will have to transition out. But I said, I'm not. And the second part they said is, how does the show make you feel? And I said, without hesitation, energized. I'm like, I put together the narrative for it. I feel like I'm getting good content, or content that is relating to some people, and I have enough variety. And maybe some episodes people listen to and say, nah, that wasn't really for me. But there's other episodes where it's like, yeah, that was. Yes. And I love going in and doing the edits and putting in, some of the overlays in YouTube, and then also doing the blog posts, which would be more concise, and linking out the previous podcast I did. Young lady who's been an international traveler, went to Haiti like 12 times, and she's in her 20s. And she said, make sure people know about travel.state.gov. So I had that redundant. And then I went on and I'm like, I didn't know this existed, but if you go somewhere overseas, it will tell you, here's where the embassy is. Here's how to notify the embassy when you'll be there. Here's like vaccinations. Here's some political things. Here's some other things to know. So I'm like, wow, so I shared that out. And then I had feedback from people of saying, hey, thanks for bringing that in, because, thinking of safe traveling, I didn't even know that existed. And I'm like, I had no idea either. So,
right. Yeah. We learn a lot as we're doing research for these topics that we do. Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's been great. So, well, Hector, guess what? It's time for dad time.
Yep.
I very much, again, appreciate the time. And I want to just preface, this wasn't 30 minutes that Hector spent with me. This was like 3 hours that Hector spent with me, working back and forth on helping me calibrate my audio, introducing me to programs, putting together a tutorial on how to use some of these different programs, and then listening to some of the shows, giving feedback, which was so invaluable to me. And then just typical daddy, the typical daddy podcast, and typicaldaddy.com. And I'll link that out of the benefit that you're providing to dads. And again, just by listening, all of those things, as you mentioned, those that you connect connect with other dads and things when I listen that I connect to. And I'm like, I was just so validated that someone else felt that way. And I think that's just so cool. So Hector, just thanks to you, thanks to the other dads, and thanks for making time tonight. I appreciate it very much.
Absolutely. And no problem, anytime. And I just want to say a few closing things, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anybody watching this, any dads out there, or moms for that matter, engage with us. Just tell us, hey, that story was similar to mine, or this is how my story was different. And let's have a discussion. The whole point of doing the podcast is not just to hear ourselves talk, but to engage the father community, to engage the parenting community. Let's do this together. Let's help each other crowdsource the information that we need to be in this new world of social media and try to stay on top of things. The way that we get this done and to be the best parents that we can be is to learn from each other's experiences, and we do that through engagement. And thank you for the time and for bringing me onto your show, David.
Yeah, Hector, in close, is there a discussion thread that goes along with Typical Daddy, and where would people find that?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Yeah, so we have a couple of places. So you can go to our Facebook page. It's the facebook.com/Typical Daddy, and you can go to the page, and we're actively checking that, so you can engage us there. I'm managing the Typical Daddy Pod Twitter account, so you can engage us there, and I do respond regularly there. We also have another Ed, who's on the Typical Daddy podcast. He's managing the Typical Daddy Twitter, but you can also go to typicaldaddy.com. We have the podcast there, and then you can comment directly on the blog post with the audio there. So you can do it that way as well. So there's many ways you can do it, whatever you're most comfortable with. And you can always send us an email at comments@typicaldaddy.com if you want it to be more private. We will use some of that information if you choose on the show, and if we can build discussions and follow-ups to episodes that are important to people, we can have a discussion around the episode that we had as well. So it just, people engage. If they can engage, then we will follow up definitely.
Wow. Well, kudos to you and to the rest of the Typical Daddy team for putting together those different input systems so people can reach out, make those expressions, and then also ask those questions. And again, thank you so much for helping me to take my show to a more professional level. And just for this opportunity to connect with you and with Typical Daddy podcast every week when I'm commuting. I'm listening to the show, and I'm listening, and then I'm listening again, and I'll usually listen about 3 times to a show to make sure. The first is kind of reconnaissance listening. The second, I'm getting a little bit deeper, and the third time, I'm really analyzing and loving it. So the work you're doing is very valuable. And again, thank you for making the time to be on the Safety Doc podcast.
You're very welcome.